Now I'm going to share with you my own personal opinion. This is what I like most about the CDBG program. I love its flexibility, the fact that you can do almost anything that you would want to do. I find that flexibility at the local level generates a lot of creativity, and I could give you a long list of incredibly creative things that were done in the areas that I worked in here in Kansas City, especially. And those lead to what we all know as best practices, exemplary kinds of things that can be shared with other communities across the country. So that's one of the things that I like most about CDBG is that kind of flexibility, which leads to creativity and best practices. And then I could give you a long list because we used to have an annual gathering of all of our communities, and we would award 5 best practices each year to them for things that they were doing. So you can imagine the list of best practices that we had in Kansas City was extensive. I wanted to share with you my 2 favorites, two favorite examples of how I think this program can really make a difference. The first one is the Wichita Cessna 21st Street Job Training Program. We got a call from HUD Secretary's office, and he had been to Wichita and he met with the CEO of Cessna and the mayor of Wichita. And they had an idea about a new program and they needed our help. And it turned out that we were able to put together something called a Section 108 loan guarantee that Cessna paid back that enabled them to develop a unique job training program in Wichita. And let me just describe for you this program. Unlike most programs, this program, in order to qualify to go into this job training program to be a worker at Cessna on their assembly line, you had to have been a recent recipient of public assistance, or what was then called welfare. So they were taking people right off the welfare rolls that had struggled all their lives to make a go of it and saying, we're going to give you an opportunity to better your life. We're going to provide this for you with a job training program. Secondly, this was not located out at the airport where Cessna's assembly plant was located. They purposely found an old abandoned grocery store in the lowest income neighborhood in Wichita and converted it to a job training center. So it was right there in the heart of the neighborhood they were trying to help. Next, while you were on the program, you received a modest stipend because they recognize that people have lives to live and they have to have some income while they're being trained. Next, you could progress as rapidly or as slowly as you chose. Some people could complete the job training program in a few months. Others might take over a year, but they were flexible in that regard. Once you were on the program, you were covered by Cessna's health insurance program. Imagine these folks who have struggled and all of a sudden they have health insurance. And then lastly, I think the thing that really made this special, most job training programs, you complete the program and then you take your chances on getting a job. Cessna promised you from the day you started that if you successfully completed the program, you were guaranteed a job at Cessna on the assembly line, making a very good income with very good benefits. That's the Wichita Cessna job training program, and we were delighted to be a part of it. And CDBG was the thing that made that happen. The next one was our Detroit NRSA. And now that I think about it, Chris, you and Michelle could probably tell this story better than I can, but we were working with the city of Detroit at a time when they were going through their bankruptcy process. Needless to say, that created all kinds of challenges for the community. One of the things that we were concerned about was that the city was spreading its CDBG money around like what I'm going to tell you in a minute, one of my reps called warm margarine. And it was not having any meaningful impact on given neighborhoods, creating those viable urban communities that I mentioned earlier. So we approached the new mayor and said, we would like for you to consider concentrating your resources in relatively small areas over a relatively short period of time in order to truly make a difference in those neighborhoods and begin to bring them back. And I think if you went to Detroit today and you looked at some of those neighborhoods, you'd say, wow, for a city that lost 1 million people over a relatively short period of time. I'm going to pause there. Michelle, Chris, either one of you, are you on? Would you like to say anything about Detroit while I've got you?
I know probably a lot of our staff don't know that we even did that kind of work, but back, how long has it been now, Chris? Maybe 10 years ago now?
Yeah.
When the city was going through their bankruptcy, they got a new mayor and he hired our firm to really turn around their community development department and design a new way for them to invest their money. The interesting thing about it is the mayor had, because they were going through bankruptcy, the mayor had no control over any resources except these federal resources. So he was all into figuring out a way to better use their, I think they had about $150 million to spend at that time. And Chris and I were leading that, and Bill actually brought this idea about NRSAs to the city of Detroit, and it was a major advantage in turning these neighborhoods around. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would also say part of the challenge that Detroit was having is that it didn't matter, people are leaving the city, and it didn't matter whether you had good credit or your income was reasonable. You just could not find a bank who is going to lend you money because the value of your property was lower than what would be the mortgage on it. So you were underwater, upside down, as we called it. So I think that was a challenge, and trying to make sure that you maintain both, all levels of income households in the city, and not just low income household. So Bill will probably talk about the income part of that, but it was a major turnaround, and we did it. We renewed it in 2020, and a lot of change had happened since that time. In fact, some of the boundaries of the areas had to be changed because incomes had gone up, and it triggered a lot of other positive accomplishments in the areas.
Chris, do you have any idea how many total houses have now been covered by the city's home repair program?
I believe the last count I looked at was about 800 homes.
Okay.
0.
When we started working with the program, the mayor described getting a home repair grant from the city was like hitting the lottery.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember, Michelle used to have these groups. They had this one day where you had thousands of people assembled at Cobo Hall, one
Right
of
at the convention center.
yeah, right, yeah.
So they would have one day anyone could come in and fill out an application. And it would be like 5,000 people that would show up to apply for this CDBG money. And at best, they were going to give grants to about 50 people. So Chris and I really worked on redesigning their home repair program, and that's what he's talking about. They've now done about 800 homes versus the 20 or 30 they used to do a year before we got there.
One of the things that I think is special that Michelle, that I think we need to emphasize here is that, and it's an issue I can tell you that those of us at HUD debated from the beginning of CDBG. If the program has to be administered in a way that almost exclusively targets low and moderate income activities in low and moderate income neighborhoods, How do you bring people who are not low mod back to those neighborhoods? Detroit desperately needed to bring people of affluence back into the community as well to create viable neighborhoods. This option, without getting into too much depth, gives you the opportunity to assist non-low mod people in addition to low mod people.